Hey everyone, welcome back to another one of our videos. Today we're going to be going through a tutorial on how to 3D model a donut using Blender. Blender is a completely free software and the link for that will be in the description below. But right before we jump in, I want to say that this video was inspired by Blender Guru on YouTube. He makes amazing content, very informative on Blender, and if you want to learn a little bit more, definitely do check him out. But that being said, let's jump right in.
Alright, so let's get started. So this is a 3D viewport. This is where most of our editing and all that fun stuff's going to happen. To navigate around, you can use the middle mouse button to orbit, and to pan, you just use shift middle. Any of these you can use with this menu over here, so you don't need to do that. That's completely up to you. On the right side here, we have this collection menu, which is just going to tell the objects that we're using. Later on, we're going to name some things to keep things organized. On the bottom right, we have the properties menu. We're going to be using this for materials, so adding color to some of our objects, to modify them, and a couple other things, but I'll go over that later. So to start off, let's just delete this cube, and let's add a torus. So this will be our donut shape. Let's change the minor radius, make that a little bigger. Let's expand it outward with the major radius. I think that looks pretty good. So left click to confirm. First thing we need to address is the fact that it's very jaggedy and not smooth at all. So to fix that, we're going to add a subdivision surface modifier. And what this does is add more of these edges. So a little bit more geometry, makes it a little bit more smoother. We're going to increase these 3 and 2, but we won't apply it just yet. We're going to save this for right before we start sculpting our donut a little bit. Also, we're going to right click on the donut and just shade it smooth so we get this really nice clean surface. First, what we're going to do is we're just going to add some bumps to our donut because no donut is ever this uniform. So just come over to sculpting, and with the draw tool enabled, we can vary our strength or size of our brush, and we can just add some bumps. First, just make sure that this mirroring tool is off, so it's not being added all over the place. Just go ahead and add some bumps. Alright, so this is our donut. I think that looks pretty good. Don't need to go too overboard, just for the sake of making things feel a little bit more realistic. But let's go back to the layout tab and let's start by creating our icing object. So to do that, we're basically going to take the upper half of this donut, we're going to duplicate it, and then we're going to set it as its own icing object. So to do that, just align yourself with one of these planes. Let's go over to the wireframe mode, press tab to edit this object, enter edit mode. Just click and drag the top half. Now we're going to go to mesh and we're going to duplicate. So we have that over here. Just press escape to let go of it and put it back to where it was. And we're going to press P to separate it by selection. What this does is now it forms this new object over here. So we're going to name this icing. And we're going to change the original name for this to donut. Let's keep things neat. So let's just go back to object mode. And the first thing we can see is that this icing looks way too thin, papery. So to do that, we're going to add something called a solidify modifier. Now what this modifier does is exactly as you think. We'll add a bit of thickness. Just make sure that the solidify modifier is above the subdivision surface modifier. All this does is just the way Blender works and applies these modifiers. So we first want to add some thickness and then smoothen it out. So let's change this offset to 1 so it'll come out. We can change the thickness to 0.035 and we can add an inner crease. What this inner crease does is just makes it hug the donut a little bit better. Alright, now that we have our icing set, we can start by now molding this ice. So creating these droopy bits that simulate how real icing would fall down. So to do that, left click the icing and enter edit mode with tab. Now before we begin, just make sure that proportional editing is enabled. Basically what this is going to do is so that when you pull down on a point to make the icing fall, it will pull connected points too to make it look a lot smoother. Also, we're going to enable the snap feature and snap it to face, making sure to checkmark project individual elements. This will just make it so that when we drag the icing down, it will stick to the donut and it won't project out all weird. So to start, just press on a single point, hit G, and you can move it around like this. But you can see it drags everything too, so just use your scroll wheel, and because this is proportional editing, you can select how much you want to draw down. We're just gonna do a whole bunch and keep going, really. As well, if you want to create a really long drip, what we can do is use a different kind of tool. So just grab 2 points with shift click and press E to extrude. So with this, it kind of creates this new like edge kind of thing, and we can just pull it down like that. So just go ahead and fix up your icing. Alright, so here we have our new icing. Make sure you pull down some of the areas in the middle too. Not have that super straight. But we are done with this for now. So what we're going to do next is add some bumpiness on top of the icing, because there's no way icing was still done evenly. So we can add some clumps, and we're going to do the same for our donut. So before we do that, let's just apply our subdivision surface modifiers right now. So for our icing, we can first apply the solidify modifier. So we can just hit that, and then we can apply our icing. Just set viewport to 3. Also, we can apply this one down here as well, and we can just hit that. So if we look in the edit menu, we can see that they added a lot more points here, applying that subdivision modifier. And this creates extra geometry that we can use to sculpt out our donut and move it around a little bit. So let's first start off with our icing. So just enter the sculpting menu on the top and go to inflate. So we're just gonna create a little bit of bump here, and we're going to especially make these drips over here look more heavy. So when we apply that, we can see that it adds a little bit of weight to it. Also, you can just kind of create bumps here, add a little bit more shape. I'll do that and I'll be back in a moment. Alright, so we just went ahead and made these pieces a bit more heavy. Also on the inside, added some bumps. Generally like that. Nope, let's go back to our layout and select our main donut. What we'll try to do here is carve out this midsection and give it the distinct indent most freshly baked donuts do have. So let's just go back to sculpting, and instead of our inflate tool, we're just going to use our crease. A slightly lower radius. I'll just roughly run it around the outside. We can see everything looks pretty good. We don't have any bulging drips on the side, pointing out all funny. So I think our sculpting is a success. So for the next part, what we're going to do is color in the icing and the donut. To begin, I'd like to just parent these two together so I can move them around. So I'm going to make the donut the parent and then make the icing underneath. So I'll first select the icing and then the parent and just hit Ctrl P. And I will set the parent to the object and keep transform. So when I move this around, it'll come with it. For our render, the donut will rest on a plane, which I'll just add here. And with S for scale, I'm going to size it up a whole bunch. Let's just grab the donut and just move it up. So I press G for grab, and then Z for Z axis. I can move it along one axis. Also, if this happens, where it moves all weird. Just disable snap to at the top. And I'll just grab Z, move it up. I'll use one of these to see if I'm raising it up a good amount, and that looks pretty good. Alright. For this plane, I'm thinking I'll make it a very light shade of pink and make the icing a pink color too. Let's just grab some random light shade of pink. We can always change it later, nothing's set in stone. That's good enough. And now let's start with the icing. Let's hit the icing there and let's add a new material. So for this color, I'll find a slightly more vibrant pink, something like that. And I will set the roughness to about 0.34. So what roughness is it'll tell you how glossy or how rough the material is going to be. We can just hit this view setting over here and it'll just give you the materials. So as you can see, the shade of pink. Also, we can add some subsurface to it. So what this subsurface scattering is just a property of how in some materials light can enter, bounce around inside, and then leave, and it'll change how it looks. So for ours, we're going to set this to 0.3, and for the radius, we're going to make it 0.3, 0.15, and 0.15. So these three values correlate to R, G, and B, and they'll basically say how much time each of these three lights will spend bouncing inside. Just so in our case, it'll make it look a little bit more red. Right, for a subsurface color, we'll set it to a more redder shade of pink. Something like that. And I believe that's good for the icing. So now for the donut itself, we can add a new material and we can make it look a bit more bread-like. Even something like that looks pretty good. We can change the subsurface value to 0.1 and all of these three values to 0.1 as well. The subsurface color will be a little bit on the yellowy side, just like that. Our roughness will be a little bit more on the matte side, so this will be about 0.77. And I think that looks pretty good. So for our donut, we need to make it look a little bit more rough. So to do that, we're going to use the shade editor. To get there, well, at least to make this look a little bit better, we can right click on Pure and do a horizontal split. It would work, that is. And we can just drop it over here. Up top, we can select the editor type and just change it to shade editor. And here you go. So these are the settings which we change on the side. Let's just make sure we have the right thing selected. And what we're going to do is we're going to add to our normal node over here. So what a normal bump is it'll add some 3D bumps to the outside to make it not so smooth. So to do that, let's first add with Shift A or add up here, we can add a noise texture right over here like that. And we can find a vector bump. So this normal will connect to that one. And the color from here will connect to the height over here. So it looks kind of nasty, but let's first edit these values. So scale will make 11, detail will make 6, and roughness will stay at 0.5. For the strength over here, we can change it to make it to 0.15. So it looks a little bit better over here. Alright, now that we have our donut bread complete, our next step is to add some sprinkles. Let's just shrink this top menu a little bit, or you can close it and open it separately. But let's start by adding an example sprinkle over here. Add a cylinder, let's drag it out, scale down, scale it up with Z. Oh, that looks kind of big actually. Let's shrink it a little bit more. How this is going to work is we're going to make one example sprinkle, and we're basically just going to put it onto the icing and it will randomize the color by itself. So I think that looks pretty good for a sprinkle. If it's too big, we can adjust it. So let's go to the icing, and in the particles tab, let's add a particle effect. So just press plus. We're going to make it a hair effect. Just check advance. We're going to render as an object and not this hair looking thing, and that object will be our sprinkle cylinder. Also, we're going to change our scale to 0.06 because our sprinkles do look a little bit small over here. And we can change the scale randomness to say 0.1. So there'll be a little bit of a variation. Also, let's come over to our rotation, check that, change our axis to normal, and change our randomize to 0.1 and our randomize phase to about 2, so the full thing. And here we go. Here are our sprinkles all over the place. And what we're going to do for basically our last step is add some color to these sprinkles. So to do that, let's come over to our sprinkle up here, to our node editor. Let's add a material first off. What we want with our donut is a whole bunch of random colors. So we don't want to set one ourselves. So we're going to use our shade editor and add a bunch of nodes that will randomize the color. But to do that, let's add in a object info node, and let's also add in a color ramp. What this object info will do is create a random number, and we'll pick one of the 5 colors that we're going to put in here. And that color will decide what color the sprinkle is. We're going to set this ramp to constant, so we don't have a random gradient of colors. We're going to now equally divide this area and put in our sprinkle colors. So we have, let's make this one a nice blue. I'll put this guy at 0.4. This one, I will set this to a green, sure. We have green, white, blue. Let's add a red. Not too intense. Something a bit softer like that. 0.6. And one last one, maybe a yellow at 0.8. Actually, no, that looks pretty good. I think I can live with that. But now that we have our sprinkles, it looks pretty good. Alright. Now that we're pretty much done our donut, first let's move the sprinkle out of the way. This doesn't need to be here. Now that we have our donut pretty much done, now we need to start figuring out how we want to render this. So let's just get rid of this node editor over here. Let's join, just go up. Now we should go to our rendering menu in the properties and change our render engine to cycles. Basically, this is a more realistic rendering engine. It'll give proper shadows and lighting. We're going to change our device. At least I have a graphics card, so I will make Blender use that. If you have a graphics card and it doesn't show up, you can go into preferences, and under systems you can select your graphics card. But for right now, let's up here go to our viewport shading, and here is our donut. But now our lighting is still a bit dim, and if we go press the camera button over here, this is what the camera sees. So we can change this up a little bit, but first let's just increase the lighting. So our lighting can be changed under this light bulb, and I'll probably increase this to say 2000, sure, and increase the size a little bit. An increased size will give it a little bit more of a softer color. I'll probably leave it about there. No, I don't like that. Let's try moving it behind. Let's bring it down with Z. See what it looks like. Actually, I think I'd like to make the bread a little less rough. So let's fix that. Go over back to our shader editor, and I'll just change the strength to about 0.11. Let's go back. I think that looks pretty good. If you want to move around the camera a little bit, grab a different angle, you can just select the camera, you can go into camera view, and open up this toolbar on the side, and under view you can lock camera to your view. So I can move it around like this, G, move it around. We can hold it on Z, slide it down a little bit. Looks good. I can pan up and get something like that. I think that looks pretty good. So I'll uncheck that. And I think we're finally ready for a render. So to render it, we're just going to come up here and select render image. Alright, so that's our final image. If you'd like to save the image, you can come up to image and save as. But other than that, I believe this concludes our Blender intro donut tutorial.
Right before I end off the video, I'd just like to bring light to the Rohingya crisis that has been an issue for the past few years and is still just as relevant today. This crisis involved the religious and ethnic persecution of the Rohingya people. The Rohingya are a Muslim ethnic minority in Myanmar who have faced severe discrimination and violence at the hands of their government, which ultimately led them to being forced out of their own homes. Most of these people have fled to seek refuge in Bangladesh, where they occupy very high population refugee camps. And as you can imagine, in a situation like this, it will be very hard to get the adequate amount of resources and supplies needed to support them. In the description below, I have included a few links that can provide some extra information and background on the topic, and I've also included a UNICEF page which includes a donation link, and the donations here will go toward help improving the lives of many of the children affected by funding basic supplies, medicine, and even education. But that being said, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of our content in the future, don't forget to subscribe, and I hope I'll be seeing you in the next one.